Want me to do it? Yeah, if you can. How do I do it? Start broadcast.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the Leaders in Housing Counseling call, our first call for 2017. We have a lot of work to do, as you all know, and we have lots of opportunities as well. We are very glad you're gathering here, and we have our special guest with Sarah Jarrique from the Director of the Office of Housing Counseling at HUD, and some of her staff members as well. We're going to jump in very quickly. Wanted to just make a couple highlight notes, and then we will dive into the bigger conversation. Glad you all are here, and I know one of the popular questions is how do you get the slides? So we did send them out as an email on the leaders list. So if you're on the leaders list, you should have gotten it. I know we have a few people who are on the call who might not be on the leaders list. You should definitely sign up. That's just how we communicate our work through the housing counseling field, and you can do it through our website, upper right-hand corner, join our mailing list. But it's also on handouts on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can download it from there as well. So, and it looks like Matthew just posted the link to signing up. So that's great. Glad to all have you here. Let me just walk through very quickly a few high points of what we're thinking about for 2017, and we won't discuss them on this call. There'll be other calls we do, but certainly if you've got thoughts or want to participate in particular initiatives, please shoot me an email. We are very actively working in many of these fields. So the first thing is we will launch a series on innovation in housing counseling. This is, well, launch is the wrong term. We've done a number of these. We are working with NeighborWorks and with other networks to have as many presentations as we can on this. These ideas are things that are exciting, innovative, that other counseling groups can do, but also ones that expand the business and the income sources that housing counseling agencies have. We're going to pay a lot of attention to fee-for-service payments for housing counseling work, and especially from lenders, and it'll be a prime focus of our work this year to try to expand and deepen that work. We will work on increasing the visibility of housing counseling. HUD's doing some excellent work in there. Others are doing work. We're trying to figure out how to pull it all together in a big way. We made a little bit of progress on that last year, I think, and I think there's a lot more to be done. We will pay a lot of attention to local collaboration. I think that means working on a state level and in smaller localities as well. And this won't be work that we do. We will largely support it. We won't be able to lead it, but really trying to make it happen in many locations so that there's more opportunities on the local level for both program and funding for housing counseling agencies. And both on the visibility and on the collaboration, we're doing a series of events with the Mortgage Bankers Association and the realtors in localities around the country. We will do a few of these this year and really work on expanding it in the future. Big success in Colorado and Cleveland on that. We'll have a rural issues task force and really try to elevate those issues in our work and see if that won't also create some traction for the housing counseling field. And then we will, we're doing a lot of thinking about how to expand homeownership. I think in the current environment, we need to figure out how that will work, and particularly not just the percentage of homeownership, but also homeownership in low and moderate income communities and in communities of color. So that's our large laundry list here of things that we are looking at. So with that note, I'm very pleased to say we starting off the new year with having Sarah Jarrique join us from, as we all know, is the director of the HUD Office of Housing Counseling, and has been just an excellent voice for housing counseling and helping us all rethink our work in some ways and expand and deepen it. And one of the big initiatives, of course, has been the certification for housing counselors. The rule just came out, and there's been an educational effort, and we thought it'd be really timely to have Sarah and her team join us and give us a sense of where things are at and what we should know from HUD's perspective on certification and any other issues. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you so much, Bruce. And thank you for having me. I want to actually thank you and Matthew and all of the leaders in housing counseling. Your work is really inspiring, and it makes a difference in the credibility and the quality of the field, and I just really appreciate your partnership. I also want to take a minute before we go right through the slides to acknowledge some members of my team that are on the call today. Brianna Benner in Chicago, Anita Olson in Minneapolis, and Robin Penick in Louisville. And they are 3 members of my team. We have 75 people in the Office of Housing Counseling, as you can tell, stationed all around the country. And the certification initiative in particular, but all of our work, it really takes a village and an incredibly complicated project to move certification forward in particular. And I just need to shout out them and all of the wonderful staff that I have. I am so lucky to work with such fantastic colleagues, and I hope that you get a chance to know us better individually. I'm going to go to the next slide, and I kind of lost my slides here. But go ahead, Matthew, you can advance.
We're having a small technical challenge
Yeah,
here. We're working on it madly.
Okay, that's all right. While you're working on it, I'll keep going, and then we'll catch up. So the agenda for my talk today, I'm going to talk for, I hope, 20 or 25 minutes and leave plenty of time for your questions, is to give you some updates on what we're up to here at HUD, and in particular to focus on certification and some details about it. If you were on the call that I had in December, much of this will be repeated, and we will be doing more repeating. So if you or anybody in your office needs to hear more, you can not only go back to this call recorded, but also to our website to get the trainings and watch for upcoming training. You can go on to the next slide. And I believe that Matthew is taking questions on the chat box as well as we go along, so we can have those queued up for when it's time to open questions. So we have data for the last 3 quarters of the fiscal year, and the housing counseling activity has been very solid. We've reached about 1 million people through the first 3 quarters of the year. Most of the work is in group education, the light blue mark there, and the second most significant source of activity is mortgage delinquency still, but that's dropped a lot. And in 2015, for example, that number was closer to 40% of all activities. And not surprising, pre-purchase counseling has grown along with rental counseling. Reverse mortgage has stayed fairly steady. Homelessness counseling and post-purchase non-delinquency remain a small but significant part of the work. It is very important, and we will be bothering you to get your data in on time and to check and make sure it's accurate. We use the data a great deal, both in targeting need, but in telling the story of the program. And it's very important to us that you're able to use the program for activities that make sense in your market, and we want to continue supporting that by showing the different needs and all the information that comes out of the 9902. Next slide. So one of the new things we introduced last year was having you report on results, and collectively the results are very impressive. 270,000 people worked with their counselor to develop a household budget. 213,000 got information on fair housing, their rights and under the Fair Housing Act. 151,000 gained access to resources like down payment assistance or eviction prevention. And 154,000 actually improved their financial capacity, improved savings, credit, use of credit, paid down debts, etc. again, I want to emphasize that if you have barriers in reporting the outcomes or questions about it, please let us know. I know some of the CMS providers have had a hard time with this section, and we really, if we know about those problems, we want to work with you to make sure they're resolved. The reporting itself shouldn't be a barrier, but you and your counselors will need to make sure you're tracking this information so that we can show that the program isn't just busy counseling, but that there are meaningful results. Next slide. Bruce mentioned awareness and visibility, and we certainly agree that housing counseling should not be the best kept secret out there. We've undertaken a project to think about how to frame housing counseling, and we've started to produce materials that we hope you'll find useful. I think we wanted to give you a little holiday present with some posters on beating the odds, the infographic here, as well as some posters on disaster recovery and how housing counseling can be useful. We'd love your feedback on these and other materials and toolkits as they come forward. One of the interesting parts of the research, again, not a surprise, and I think I've discussed this with this group before, is the name housing counseling does not inspire confidence and vision in the part of people who hear it and don't know what it is. And so we are thinking about whether there is a better name for the work. Many of you have renamed yourselves things other than housing counselors. This is definitely not a decision we've made and may not be a priority or a direction we go. But some of the research we've done has shown that a term like housing advisor might be both more accurate and more effective a term than housing counseling. And we'll be interested in your feedback on that as we move forward with some of these projects. We will be producing toolkits that explain the value of housing counseling for lenders and real estate professionals, and the work that the National Housing Resource Center is doing with those stakeholders will inform our work as well. So we really appreciate the dialogue with you around awareness and visibility. Not in this slide, but I will add that we're continuing our research as well. We will have another report on our very large randomized research project of first-time home buyers, and we are using those results to improve the program. So expect another webinar and some research from us, and we're continuing to disseminate a lot of research that HUD has produced over the summer on housing counseling. Next slide. I don't want to turn to certification without talking for a minute about life after HAMP. We have been, again, with your organization, very concerned about what will be lost when HAMP expired at the end of last year. And we have been successful, I think, in getting the attention of federal agencies and the GSEs and the MBA on what should come next. So we are working on a number of projects to make sure that consumers have a transparent, sustainable option for facing delinquency and default. And in particular, I'm working on a small piece of that, a borrower looking at borrower engagement in loss mitigation, how to get the word out to borrowers that that reaching out to a housing counselor is should be an important part of the process. Next slide, please. So the final rule. We published a rule on December 14th that implements a number of statutory requirements. The one that you're probably the most interested in is that there's a requirement that housing counselors will have to be certified by HUD, and that will be effective 3 years after the exam becomes available. We will publish a Federal Register notice to let you know when the exam is available. We expect it to be the spring. I will tell you that that's very much dependent on technology translations to some extent, some other things. So it's logistical issues, but we wanted to go ahead and let you know it was coming. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go ahead, Matthew. Key vision of the final rule are there are a few that you need to know. Are you able to advance the slide? There you go.
Yep.
All housing counseling provided under or in connection with any HUD program must be performed by a HUD certified housing counselor. That means that, and then a HUD certified housing counselor, what is that? There are two elements. One, they have to pass the certification examination, which covers 6 topics, and they also must work for a HUD approved housing counseling agency. So the vision here is that housing counseling that's conducted as part of any HUD program is going to meet standards set by the Office of Housing Counseling, and the individual counselors will have passed an examination in addition to the other standards we expect as being part of the HUD housing counseling program. Next slide. The vision is an important one, especially since nobody is raising their hand saying we need to be tested. And frankly, I have great confidence in the quality of counseling. So it's not as though we needed to weed out a whole lot of very bad actors. And I don't think that's what this is about at all. In the context of getting through the financial crisis and knowing how much consumers need to rely on a trustworthy resource, we think there are a lot of benefits to certification and to essentially having a federal credential saying that you are able to conduct housing counseling. We are hopeful that the certification requirement will result in a professionalized field with better pay. Now that may be more costly to the agencies, but I think overall it will bring recognition to the entire field, both with consumers and also with funders. And I hope it will make it easier for consumers to avoid scams and cons, which make me crazy, and there's still a scam a day I see out there. So lots of benefits of certification, but of course you will let us know if the rubber really met the road on this one. Next slide, please. There are different stages in the final rule, and some of the elements are effective not 3 years from now, but next week, actually. First, a requirement that agencies in our program have to provide homeownership counseling that addresses the entire process of homeownership. Second, a requirement relating to the distribution of home inspection materials. Third, a requirement relating to the misuse of housing counseling program funds. And fourth, requirements relating to prohibitions against grant funds going to organizations that have election law violations. Now, although they are effective immediately or very soon, we are not going to ask for major changes to your programs or enforcement right off the bat. Our plan is to provide you tools to achieve compliance with all 4 of these areas, and we're really not looking for you to make changes, significant changes, until you see the tools. Our underlying belief, frankly, is that you are already compliant with 95% of the requirements here. Many of these are not new, or they're stated in a different way, and we don't think it will be hard to become compliant. We'd like to make it as easy as possible, actually. So these are requirements that are effective 30 days, and we will show you the path to become compliant with them in the near future. We have a pretty robust training plan over the next few months. Next slide, please. There are a number of requirements that are effective 36 months after certification. The first is that any individual providing housing counseling has to be certified. And again, the two steps, they have to pass the test and they have to work for a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. Second, any agency providing housing counseling connected with any HUD program must be approved by HUD to participate in the housing counseling program. I'm going to pause a minute on this one. This is referring to entities you may be aware of that use CDBG or home funds for their housing counseling program, but are not now HUD-approved housing counseling agencies. Family self-sufficiency programs that provide counseling to help people get ready for home ownership, for example. Those programs will have to become HUD-approved counseling agencies, and their counselors will have to be HUD-approved within 36 months. I'll talk more about the options there because there are opportunities for existing housing counseling agencies, and there are opportunities to help new entities become HUD-approved. But this requirement is really, I think, the one that involves the most change for the field as a whole. It may not involve a lot of change for existing HUD-approved agencies, but it will involve change for agencies that are not yet in the HUD program. The third is the requirement that all HUD housing counseling that occurs has to be reported on, all counseling that is reported on the 9902 has to be performed by HUD certified housing counselors, and that will be in effect 36 months after the exam is available. Next slide, please. There are a couple more requirements. Intermediaries and state housing finance agencies that are in the counseling program have to ensure that their affiliates are compliant with the certification requirements within 36 months. There is a requirement that group education must be overseen by a HUD-certified counselor, not delivered by. It could still be delivered by somebody who's not a counselor, but the program has to be overseen by a HUD-certified counselor. And finally, that agencies who come in applying to HUD's housing counseling program have to meet the housing counseling certification requirements. So in essence, the requirements relating to housing counselor certification will not be effective and will not be finally enforced until 36 months after the exam is available. Needless to say, don't wait. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So a little more about what it means for the housing counselor. You have to pass an examination that covers 6 major topics. The topics, let me just pull those out, are financial management, property maintenance, responsibilities of home ownership and tenancy, fair housing laws, housing affordability, avoidance of and response to rental or mortgage delinquency or default. Those 6 topics, all 6 have to be part of the test. The counselor has to pass. The counselor only has to pass the certification examination once. There are not continuing education requirements. We implemented the statute as written. The counselor has to work for an agency, a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. That means an affiliate that's HUD-approved or the direct HUD approval. Basically, if you are on our list at HUD.gov as an active housing counseling agency, those are the entities that can employ certified housing counselors. Once the exam is available, and we've let you know that through a Federal Register notice, you can take the test and become certified. And that means that you will go into a website, take the test. If you pass, you'll get a notice you passed. Your entity will have to validate that you work for them. And so you will have a separate person on your staff, a senior director, manager, able to access a federal system that validates employment. Again, all agencies have to comply with certification by 3 years from the date the exam is available. Next slide. You can register for the exam at hudhousingcounselors.com. You may be familiar with this site. It has training materials on it now for free. You will be able to take the exam online or at a proctoring location. We estimate the cost in the rule at $100 to $140, depending on where you take the test. That number may be subject to change, both either up or down, and depends on the cost, what it costs us to have you take the test. The test will be available in English and Spanish, and the training materials will be available in English and Spanish as well. And you can take the test as many times as you want, but you're going to have to pay a fee to do that. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the group education requirement. Group education has to be overseen by a counselor, which means they must approve the curriculum and the materials used, and they have to have some monitoring of the delivery. It doesn't mean they have to be present at every class, but they have to have a way that they can stand behind the quality of service delivered. If you're using an online service for education, a certified counselor at your site must periodically review and ensure that the online materials are things that your agency is comfortable standing behind and meets our requirements and standards, which have not changed. Guest speakers that you have in classes do not have to be HUD certified, but they do have to follow existing rules about steering and referrals, etc. Next slide, please. If you're a pass-through organization, you don't do direct service delivery, but you're a grant maker, staff whose sole role is to administer a program do not have to become HUD certified counselors. These entities, if you're solely a pass-through entity, do not have to become HUD counseling agencies. So this is for the example of an entity like a city that might have CDBG funds that are used for housing counseling. The CDBG administrators do not have to become HUD-approved counseling agencies, and that city as a whole does not have to become HUD-approved. Next slide, please. There are HUD programs impacted by the final rule, since it applies to any housing counseling required by or provided in connection with all HUD programs. So there are a lot of programs that could be affected. CDBG can be used for housing counseling, family self-sufficiency, and home I mentioned. But, and there's the but, the final rule defines what housing counseling is very narrowly. Next slide. So if you know of an entity that is providing services under CDBG or home or public housing or other HUD programs, it's not housing counseling and it's not subject to the rule if the services are strictly housing information or referral. If the services are routine administrative activities, loan eligibility, program eligibility, and intake, case management that provides a lot of intensive services, in addition, may touch on some aspects of housing counseling, but case management that's big, like HOPWA or emergency shelter grants, are not housing counseling for purpose of the rule, and those case managers do not have to become certified. Fair housing advice and advocacy that does not include all of the elements that you think of as housing counseling around budgeting, et cetera, would not trigger the certification requirement here. So this area is really for programs that are not currently in the HUD housing counseling program and are trying to figure out if they need certification or not. Now, many of the programs within your agencies that aren't part of your housing counseling program may be affected. So, for example, if you are in the housing counseling program now for your home ownership services, you do first-time home buyer counseling and education, but you have a different arm that does rental counseling, and it is rental housing counseling. It's funded through HUD ultimately, and it's not something that you've chosen to report on the 9902, and those counselors are not part of your HUD program. If they are doing housing counseling as defined by the rule, then 3 years from now, that part of your program will have to be done with HUD-approved HUD-certified housing counselors. So we expect this to be an area of a little confusion, and you'll let me know by your questions whether we've clarified it or made it even more confusing. I hope we haven't. Let's go to the next slide, please. So for agencies that are affected by the rule and are not already HUD-approved counseling agencies, they have 4 options. Their first option is to apply for HUD to become approved or as a housing counseling entity, or they can join a HUD-approved intermediary or state housing finance agency and be part of our program. They can also partner with an existing housing counseling agency to deliver those services. So again, in the example of a family self-sufficiency program or a rental program, the entity may not be HUD approved, may have no other HUD counseling experience. They may prefer to outsource that function essentially to a HUD approved counseling agency that employs HUD certified counselors. And that is an opportunity for existing groups. Third, they can modify the program to make it compliant. And fourth, and I think would be tragic, they could stop delivering housing counseling services before the final compliance date 3 years from now. Again, making this more concrete. If an entity is using community development block grant funds for counseling program, if it is delivering housing counseling services, and if it is not a HUD-approved counseling agency, it will have to become one. It will have to partner with one. It will have to modify its program, or it will have to stop the housing counseling part of its program 3 years from now in order to comply with this final rule. Next slide, please. We're doing a lot of outreach. These webinars will continue, and we have one posted already on our website that we did in December. We have a lot of training on our website, and the URL is listed there on HUD Exchange. We have a huge number of frequently asked questions, training and tools to, if you're not yet in the HUD program, to understand whether you're covered by the rule or not. And we're planning to do a lot of outreach to stakeholders, working with our colleagues here at HUD. And any of you who think it would be helpful for us to conduct a special session for your city or colleagues or whatever, we really want to make this as clear and give you the facts so that you can make the adjustments to your program that might be needed. Next slide, please. So you all know how to reach us pretty well, and our email box is a good place to send questions. But in the short term, we're taking questions today, and any ones we don't get to, we've told Bruce and Matthew that we'll respond after the call to make sure you all have all your questions answered as soon as possible. I would also say that if you do see problems or opportunities with the implementation of the final rule, please let us know. Send us a note with your reaction and feedback, how it's working or where it may be a problem, where you may need more training. We really need your partnership and your feedback in order to make this work as well as possible. I am going to turn it back to open for questions in a minute. I just want to say on a personal level, having been involved in the housing counseling field, not nearly as long as some of you, but for the last, I don't know, 15 years or so, this is a very exciting step. It's an important one in getting the recognition that you deserve for your professionalism, your ethics, and your work. It is an opportunity, I think, to elevate the field and, most importantly, to increase the awareness among people who could really, really use your services and don't even know they exist. So I hope we'll see all those good things come from the rule, and but it's only in partnership with you that we can make it happen. So thank you. And now I'll give it back to Bruce and Matthew.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So Matthew, we got some questions in the queue. One or two? Oh, got a sheet
Yeah,
of
we have
papers
quite a
here.
few. So this is, we're kind of going in order, so we're going to go back to your initial conversation prior to the certification first. Someone just asked if there is a callback number available yet for the December 19th conference call.
We'll share the link when we have it. I'm not sure.
Okay. Just a comment, going back to your comments about the data reporting. Someone said that better communication and TA, I'm not sure what TA, from
Technical
CMAX.
assistant. Okay.
Technical assistance from CMAX will improve timeliness of data reporting. Someone asked how the posters that you all had released, how they can get those.
So we had the number that we had. We distributed to larger to intermediaries and housing finance agencies. I believe it may have gone to every agency. I'm actually not sure. But the posters are available on our website, so you can download them there. We are looking into whether we can do a print store, and so that you can order them. And it actually would help me if there is demand and value to let us know through the email box if that would be useful, because it's a little bit of a fight here to get a lot of print material. So please let us know if you can use them, and in the meantime, they are on the website now. You can create printed documents from them.
All right, and someone else did write in to say that to thank you first for doing them in English and Spanish, and said they were helpful and they have them posted around the agency. So going back to this is another comment on the idea of housing advisors. This person said that there could be some confusion with the role of loan officers because some lenders use the term housing advisor, I guess, for loan officers.
Sorry. Yeah, some loan officers call themselves housing counselors too. This is the problem, right?
Yep.
So I think that, again, they won't be able to call themselves HUD-certified housing counselors or whatever other name we use. You know, anecdotes are valuable here. So if you've got a loan officer calling themselves a housing counselor or even a housing advisor, shoot me or Bruce an example, because that's helpful to us. By the way, if I do hear of a loan officer calling themselves a housing counselor who's not in our program, I actually send them a cease and desist letter. I don't have the legal authority to stop them, but they very quickly do pull back when we're aware of them.
That is great. Thank you for that.
It bugs me. You're welcome.
All right. Someone asked if you could, now getting into the certification, if you could give an example of a violation under federal law related to an election to federal office.
Yeah. The election law violations are extremely rare, but they would involve, for example, encouraging people to vote more than once, or encouraging false registration. And there have been entities who have been accused of, I don't know if they've been convicted, for attempting to tamper with elections. And so what the rule is going to is saying, if you're a housing counseling agency, if you have employees on your staff who have been convicted of election law violations, then we cannot provide you with support.
All right. Someone asked, so they're an agency that's not currently offering loss mitigation counseling. They understood what you were saying, I think, with the January 17th requirements, as saying that are they now going to have to offer all types of counseling to remain HUD certified?
Oh, thank you for that question. No, is the short answer. Even though the counselors are being tested in a broad number of areas, and even though the counseling agencies will have to make sure their programs explain the full cycle of homeownership, all aspects of homeownership. You will not have to offer services in every single area of homeownership, for example. What we expect in plain English is, first of all, that counselors will have a broad knowledge of all types of housing so they can make intelligent referrals, and so they can help clients who inevitably in their lives will go between renting, owning, successful owning, less successful owning, etc. The second, and for the agency and the program, the idea would be that if you're thinking about pre-purchase counseling, for example, that there is an awareness or referral to resources for what to expect after you've moved in, and how to avoid delinquency and default. By the way, that's part of our standards now. That's not new. And so a lot of the homeownership, full cycle of homeownership, full cycle of rental housing requirements are not going to change your program.
Great, thank you. If you could just repeat, please, the 6 topics that the exam will cover.
I will, and I'm going to ask my staff to add in a slide for future presentations with them, as well as an FAQ, because I had to search for them. I should know them by heart. They are financial management, property maintenance, responsibilities of homeownership and tenancy, fair housing laws, housing affordability, avoidance of and response to rental or mortgage delinquency or default. That last one's a mouthful. These are in the statute, they're in the rule, and we will put them up front on our materials so you can see. Our training that you can download at the testing site is organized by the 6 topics and walks you through what we think would be good to know for each topic. There is excellent training offered by our training partners on the 6 topics. And so if you've been doing delinquency and default counseling for 10 years and really don't know much about rental counseling, rental responsibilities, the training should be very helpful, but also the knowledge should be very helpful.
Great. And are there practice exams available with the materials?
The practice exams will be available when the examination is available. We are not, as I understand it, we are not permitted to, and we may not have the capacity to post the practice exam until we have the exam ready to go.
Okay. Someone asked if you could just go back over the state financing agency requirements.
So state housing finance agencies, intermediaries, and we have national and regional intermediaries, anybody that has affiliates doing housing counseling. Those entities will have to make sure that their affiliates are compliant with these rules during the time frame, mostly the 36 months for individual counselor certification. If the intermediary or HFA does not do direct service delivery, if they don't meet with clients and counsel and keep files of their counseling and report it to us on the 9902, then their staff will not have to become HUD certified. Similarly, in a housing counseling agency, the executive director, the fiscal person, the program manager, if they don't do direct service, will not have to become HUD certified. However, you are required, each entity that does direct service is going to have a person on staff who is certified and who meets our existing requirements within 36 months of the effective date. I hope that answered that question. They should re-ask it if I didn't understand.
All right, thank you. Someone asked when the exam becomes available, will there also be provided the specific date that for compliance?
Sure, but again, it's 3 years.
All right.
Please don't wait till the end of the 3 years. I think it's really going to be helpful to us if counselors come in early We need the feedback. We want to get a sense of whether the test is hitting the mark or not. There may be questions that are problematic, and we need that feedback. So we really hope people will go in early to take the test. And by the way, our experience is very much modeled on the test that is now required for reverse mortgage counselors, and we get very helpful feedback on that. And to answer a question you haven't asked, reverse mortgage counselors will have to take 2 tests. Lucky them. They will have to comply with this, and they will have to take the reverse mortgage test.
Great. I think you addressed this, but maybe just if we go back over. So with the homebuyer education, if you could just elaborate on overseen. So they asked specifically, is it sufficient if the manager is the department manager is certified, or does each individual class need to be overseen by a certified counselor?
The overseen, I don't think that does not mean physical presence at the class. Overseen means the quality of services delivered in group education. There's responsibility for it with the certified housing counselor. We will have toolkits and guidance on this.
Great. So someone asked, they basically ran through a bunch of different kind of funding sources and why those were not going to be sufficient for funding for the additional training, and just asked if there are any ideas for how to fund the additional training that's going to be required.
The training funding for training is can be difficult in some areas, and I don't have magic funding sources. I think that, again, if we hear about the needs, it's helpful to us, and we can share that with our leadership and our grant making. We would also note that a number of foundations and lenders do support various training entities for housing counseling. But I would say let us know what your needs are. I've been very, very impressed by the level and quality of training that counselors do have access to. The different agencies make sure they get. And if there are gaps, either resource gaps or knowledge gaps, we'd love to work with you to address them.
And I'll just mention that we certainly have included that when we speak to appropriators in Congress about the additional need for additional funding to help provide training for the certification requirements. Someone asked if agencies can use HUD funds to pay for the exam, the cost
Yes.
of the exam. All right.
Yes, that was in the last NOFA, and it is expected to be in future NOFA.
Great. Someone asked if the training materials that are currently available are those might those change prior to the exam being available, or are those locked in?
Yes. Well, guess what? Unfortunately, they have to change because the world changes. So when the CFPB puts out changes to TRID, or when HAMP goes away, or anything else that affects the quality of the work you do with a client, the training materials and the test are going to have to change too. So your test is a point-in-time knowledge of what is going on. We are very cognizant that it's a big investment on your part to do the training, and we're not going to make changes quickly or lightly. I think I don't know the frequency with which we'll make changes, but if something affecting the core work changes, we will have to change both the training and the test.
And would that be like in a formal, maybe it would depend if it would be like formal under a register announcement, or just?
No, it would not be a formal Federal Register announcement. It would just be adjustments. Again, this is similar with the reverse mortgage counseling. They've had a lot of changes the last 2 years in terms of reverse mortgages, so our test has changed with that as well. We try to notify, and let me get back to you on how we will provide notice if there are changes in content.
Great. This is an aside from the certification discussion, but someone asked if there's any conversations happening about integrating housing counseling for homeowners who are in default.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think that was all there was to it, but
Well, I think just to jump in, I think it's people who who need to help getting a modification on their loan or other resolution. Is there a way to make it more automatic that people get to counseling?
Well, Bruce is working on that. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the life after HAMP discussion and how to make it, again, routine, sustainable, funded for the agencies, given all the resources that are going away. So we're working on that, but we're not there yet. That's for sure. Thank you.
All right, so back to the certification. Someone asked if there will be outreach materials for county housing agencies and other pass-through funders.
We're doing outreach now to trade associations that they may be part of, and doing similar presentations to the one you're seeing now. We welcome your suggestions, though, and if you know of entities that would be good for us to connect with, I'd appreciate that. I also have a request. I meant to say it when we were at that slide. For the entities that aren't expecting this or do not know how this will affect their program, it would help a lot if we can share with them agencies and programs that might be willing to mentor, answer questions, or provide reassurance. And so in addition to various kinds of partnerships you may already have, if you would like to help us not just spread the word, but actually help with answering questions or providing a little technical assistance one-on-one, we would really appreciate that, because it's one thing for them to hear from us, here's how you do it. It's another to hear from a counselor in an agency similar to theirs. So we are looking for testimonials isn't the right word, but folks who are willing to help with coaching or answer questions.
Great. Somebody asked if a client calls and wants to discuss whether a refinance makes sense for them, would that be considered counseling?
Interesting question. I think that it depends on how you're holding yourself out to that client and what you do. So if you generally, refinancing right now is part of post-purchase non-delinquency counseling. And there are entities that do this as a form of housing counseling. If you are, so I think generally the answer is going to be yes. However, if your main line of business is offering a CDFI loan fund that happens to do refinancing, you don't have a housing counseling program now, and a client is calling because they want to know if they're eligible for that program, that would not be housing counseling. That's an eligibility discussion. I hope that makes sense.
All right. Someone asked, what is the definition of counseling under the rule, and said they're thinking of legal groups providing advice under a CDBG program and whether they would need to become HUD approved.
We have sections of the rule that addresses this and our frequently asked questions, and what I may do is circulate the specific language after the call. There are indicators of what is housing counseling and what isn't that we go into in greater depth. A legal services organization that is providing legal advice should not trip into housing counseling. That should not be a problem if they're using their CDBG funds for legal services. I have to say, and so you'll take a look. But if it's not called a housing counseling program, if you are not providing the full scope of housing counseling services, it's unlikely that it will fall into the certification requirement.
Great. And I'll just say we're getting close to 2 o'clock, and I know Sarah has to drop off right at 2. So we still have a long list of questions, and I apologize that we won't get to all of them, but we will pass them along to the HUD staff and can get some follow-up answers for questions we don't get to. Someone asked if HUD has updated the qualifications for an agency to become a HUD-approved agency.
The qualifications have not changed, but what we have done is really work on our process and on tools. So the process, we've worked a lot to streamline, and we're still working on that. And we're about to issue a tool that will help agencies decide for themselves, see what the requirements are, and get prepared for that. We do have a process where somebody who inquires about becoming a new entity is assigned a mentor and work through the process with them. And we've cut down the time that the process takes quite a lot. So the content of the requirements are the same, but I hope the process is a lot easier.
All right. This is an interesting question. So we're a HUD-approved agency, but only for our pre-purchase counseling. However, we do provide rental housing counseling and home buyer ed. We do not intend to apply for HUD certification for our rental housing counseling or include it in our housing counseling plan. Do our rental housing counselors have to be certified?
So this really goes to whether those programs are funded with either required by or provided in connection with any program of HUD. So for example, it depends on the context of how those programs are funded and what they're being provided with. And I would encourage that entity to look at the sections of the rule and FAQs about what it means to be required by or provided under a program of HUD. If they're completely independent, they're funded through non-federal funds and offered as part of a completely different program, they may not have to be. But you have to look at that language.
All right, and I think this is an important question, and we'll make this the last one. If you are already certified, do you still have to become certified through HUD, or is your certification still good?
There is no HUD certification right now, and you will have to become HUD certified. HUD supports and believes in other counselor certifications, such as NCHEC, such as National Industry Standards, such as other entities that provide certification. However, that is not the same as becoming a HUD certified counselor. And so you will have to go through this process if you are going to continue in the housing counseling program.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Great questions. I'm sorry I don't have more time also. I look forward to answering them. And please work with NHRC, and we'll work with you to make sure that we answer them and then work with you as you plan for implementation.
Great. Thank you very much, Sharon. I'll kick it back over to Bruce.
Great. Thanks so much, Sarah. It's been a terrific conversation, and we will keep this dialogue going throughout the year, and appreciate all the work that HUD has been doing. It's been a very good relationship, and we're, I think, very pleased with how it's all working out. So good luck in 2017, and we'll be in touch. I'm going to move quickly on. Just a reminder to people, thank you for all the members who are NHRC members. We really appreciate that. It's really a great vote of confidence. If your organization has not joined yet, please do. You know, the real thing is you're supporting the work that we do out in the field, and we really are reaching out to lots of you to do work both on funding and on some of the bigger programmatic challenges that our community has. And we'll continue doing this good work and getting members in. There's some benefits as well, but really what you're doing is supporting the cause, and we appreciate that. We will be back again in 2 weeks. And if for some reason you are not on the Leaders in Housing Counseling list, and I've heard that a few of you aren't, you know, just sign up on our website. It's Matthew's circulated the link on the chat box, but it's our website is just hsgcenter.org, and you can upper right-hand corner, there's join our mailing list, and we'll get you signed in. We had a whole rush of new people come in for this call, and we're glad to have you, but you want to really stay connected for the entire year. So we'll talk again in 2 weeks. Certainly any kinds of issues that we talked about at the very beginning of the call, you have some thoughts about how we might be able to more effectively do them, please let us know. We'll be in touch with you about lots of the good work we're doing and you're doing. All right. Welcome to 2017. Bye.